Nicholas Cholo has rejoined us from his annual snowbird visit to Mexico. He's back, and we were glad to see him coming in on the bus, and good to have him back with us. I am kind of tickled. I hope you will be watching Tuesday night. This YouTube program seems to be taking off a little bit. We're beginning to get a little smoother with it. We're not quite as good as Inessa's health tips on Facebook yet, but we hope that you will sort of push this with your friends. And if you're trying to teach people, it is a kind of a nice thing to suggest, hey, why don't you watch this and be thoughtful about it and see if good can come from it. Jeff Asher and John Hines are going to be our guests. Yeah, it's up here. This is our Prove All Things Facebook page. If you haven't been on Facebook, the church has begun doing that dreaded thing, advertising on Facebook, which I'm sure you all love to get Facebook ads, but it does work. We had a lot of folks who were members of the church who were watching, and we wanted to reach out to some other people, and so we have begun Friday, I think it was, we have begun reaching out to other folks. So far we're limiting it to the U.S. We may go beyond that a little bit later on to other countries. I have had at least one request from Nigeria to figure out how they can get on it. And so it should do good for us in the long run. It'll build, and Dave and I have gotten a little smoother in how we present it, so we hope it goes well, and we hope you'll make use of it. It's a tool. All right, Dave, have you got me up here yet? The actual real me? I'm coming, apparently. I'm trying to look around and see. Anyway, there. Well, I'm almost there. Let's see. Am I not there yet, Dave? We've been having troubles trying to figure everything out this morning. Let's try doing this one more time. Oh, Dave. It's easier. I'd love being able to blame Dave for these things. Let's try something. See what I can accomplish here. All right. I'll figure it out here eventually. There we go. It should be up there. We up there? Yeah. I'm getting old and dizzy and these things. I had notes here a minute ago, but anyway, this sermon, I don't know what's happened to this. They're back there. I think I'll be okay, Rick. Thank you very much. If I need that Bible, bring it up to me. I have a couple here as a spare, so we'll be all right. This sermon used to be entitled 6 Questions of Life for Young People, and I have trouble giving numbers in sermons, because usually I think of, like 7 questions of life or 5, I vary the number, and so it can get a little confusing here. I meant to catch our song leader, and Nathaniel, and suggest that we sing How Shall the Young Secure Their Hearts. He might be able to do that toward the end of the lesson. But we do have this morning a lot of young people here, and we want you to think about, how in the world do I answer some basic questions? Because there are some. For instance, one of the first ones is, what kind of son or daughter are you going to be? Every parent has heard horror stories of terrible children who wind up being disobedient and rebellious, children who wind up suing their parents for this, that, or the other. Children who refuse to honor their parents in any regret. Any respect. We've all seen parents with their children in grocery stores and other public places where the children are talking back to their parents, and rebellious and so forth. What kind are you going to be? Are you going to be someone that your parents are ashamed of and regret having? The world says that as a child, you're only young once, so enjoy it every way you can. But that's not exactly what the scripture says to you. As it speaks, we read just a moment ago in Ecclesiastes 12 and verse 1. And you know, Ecclesiastes 12 does say, and that's why I had Darrell, when he read it, read the previous two verses to chapter 12 and verse 1. And it does say that you should enjoy your youth. There's no reason for you to go through life as a young person glum and sad and terribly serious. But it does say to remember your Creator in the days of your youth. It says enjoy your youth, but remember your Creator there when the evil days come, lest the evil days come later in life for you. So that's one of the first things that you need to do as you want to prove to be the kind of son or daughter that your parents can respect and be happy about. You might also look in Ephesians, the 6th chapter, and verses 1 through 3, where it says, children, obey your parents in the Lord. In other words, as long as your parents are encouraging you to do what's good and right, as God would have it, then you need to be obedient to your parents. Respect their choices, respect their guidance, honor them in what you do. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise. It was the first of the Mosaic promises or Mosaic commands. Honor your father and mother, that it may be well with thee, and that thou mayest live long on the earth. So it was the first commandment. It's the first commandment you would learn in life. It was the first of the 10 commandments. And so it's a basic building block of your life. If you want to have a good life, if you want to have a happy life, if you want to prepare yourself for the future, this is the first building block. Don't talk about school yet. Don't talk about all your education. Don't talk about your professional background. The first building block is honor your father and mother. And if you'll do that, everything else will begin to fall into place. But you know, when you haven't done the first thing, the basic thing, there's a lot of grief, a lot of sadness, a lot of stress that's going to come your way that didn't have to come because you didn't put the foundation down first. As you think about this, you might look at another passage in this particular regard. Look at Proverbs 10, a couple of places. Verse 1, for instance, 10 and 1 says, a wise son maketh a glad father, but a foolish son is the heaviness of his mother. There you are making, my wife and I run a little business. Boys are involved in it with us, but we have people who come to us for a job all the time. And it's just almost automatic. They come, and one of the first questions based on our type of work that we ask is, do you have a driver's license? Well, no, I did some dumb things when I was a kid. That would have been about 2 years ago for most of them. And they fooled around in a car. They committed some crime that got them in trouble, started them down the wrong road. Another one of our questions, have you ever been arrested? And yeah, well, I've been arrested, and I ran into some trouble with the car and lost my license and so forth. You've messed your life up. Another one of the things you find out from a lot of these young people is, are you married? No, but I've been living with this woman for the last 3 or 4 years. We've got 4 kids. I got a couple others by other women. A wise son maketh a glad father. A foolish son is the heaviness of his mother. You need to get a little smart, a little faster, and do things sort of by the numbers. Do things as your parents direct you. And a lot of it goes back to that first one. Honor your father and mother. Obey your father and mother. But you might notice verse 25, as the whirlwind passeth, so is the wicked no more. But the righteous is an everlasting foundation. You know, we see so much stuff on the media these days about all these stars who are doing this and that, and it's ungodly, and they're having wild parties, and they're marrying 5 and 6 times, and they're associated with this one and that one, and they're hooked up here and there. You know, that's the whirlwind. Makes a big splash for a while, but the wicked will be no more. Righteousness is the foundation. So as you think about what kind of son or daughter you're going to be, you might look in Proverbs 13, verse 1. A wise son heareth his father's instruction, but a scorner heareth not rebuke. You seen a teenager who's always talking back to his folks? He thinks it's funny. You know, I suppose at one point or another, the parents even laughed at it. He could have a brilliant turn of words, making fun of mom and dad, making fun of his teachers, making fun of the police. A scorner heareth not rebuke. You're just not listening. A wise son heareth his father's instruction. But there's other questions for young people. One of the questions is, what kind of character shall I develop? What sort of person will I be? You might look in Ecclesiastes 7 and verse 1, and this is a basic thing. A good name is better than precious ointment. You know, your parents may not be able to give you $1 million. You were expecting that, maybe. That may not happen. They may spend every dime on their health and their situation and may not have had a lot of money to begin with. But the one thing that they can and probably will give you is a good name. Someone who was honest, worked hard, did their best, obeyed the laws of this land, and loved God. And that name will come down to you. And you know, there's a lot of people, when you tell them, hey, my dad was Joe Schmo, they'll look at you a second time. I knew him. I knew him. He was good people. If even half of him rubbed off on you, you'll work. You'll be all right. A good name is better than precious ointment. Have you got a good name? Don't mess it up. It's something valuable. Believe it or not, you can even occasionally take it to the bank. And the banker will know. And your employer may know. It's more important than your grades in school a lot of times. If the folks in the neighborhood and the community know your folks and they had a good reputation, that matters way more than anything else you can splash on. Look in Proverbs 22 and verse 1. A good name is rather to be chosen than great riches. Which do you think is more important? You know, this guy Justin Bieber has a lot of money. Do you really think he's got a good name now? He's really popular. There's a lot of people who read about him in the newspaper. Do you really think he's got a good name right now? You might think about that. He's a star. Does he really have a good name? You might think about those things. It's rather to be chosen than great riches, and loving favor rather than silver and gold. And that's what your parents have passed down to you. They've passed down loving favor to you. They may not have given you much money. They may not have had any to give. But they gave you a good name, and they gave you their love and all the grace they could pass on to you. That matters quite a bit. You know, my sister, we went to Veronica's wedding yesterday, and my sister was there, and it come time for the married couple to leave, and everybody throws rice. Usually rice used to be cheap, and that's what we all threw, but for some reason that fell out of favor. And so somebody came up with the idea of, well, we'll throw bird seed. Mary said, bird seed? That's terrible. All that is weed seed. It falls on the ground after you've thrown it on the married couple, and you'll see in about 2 or 3 weeks a bunch of weeds falling out of the ground. So she had grass seed. She was very proud of it. She told me she had Kentucky blue and I think fescue or something like that, so that you could throw it out and it would aid in the growing of the grass and the lawn around there. But you just don't have any trouble growing weeds. You don't have to fertilize them. You don't have to help them. You don't have to make sure the soil condition is right. They will just grow nearly anywhere. Weeds grow. Is that the kind of person you want to be? A weed? In 1 Timothy 4 and verse 12, the scripture says, let no man despise thy youth. Now that doesn't mean you better not talk bad about me or I'll punch you. It means you behave and develop the character so that nobody looks down on you because you're a young man or a young woman. You don't dress immodestly. You don't talk in a slutty fashion. You carry yourself as a Christian should, as a decent young man should. And by doing that, no man will despise your youth. If you're an example of the believers in word, in conversation, in charity, in spirit, in faith, in purity, everybody's going to pay attention to you. It may not be obvious, but they'll be talking about you behind your back. And it's that good kind of talk where everybody says, hey, have you noticed that Evan Eels? That boy's got some sense. He behaves. He speaks well. He doesn't act like a fool. Now, they don't tell you that, do they, Evan? But they all say that behind your back. Now, you pull a fool stunt or two, go out and wreck the car 5 or 6 times, start running around with crazy women. You can run around with some women, but not the crazy kind. Get yourself 4 or 5 facial tattoos and a lot of piercings, and color your hair some odd color unknown in nature. And people will not say that about you anymore. They'll say, have you seen that Evan Eels? That boy's going nuts. Let no man despise thy youth. It's really simple, isn't it? But as well, who am I going to associate with? You go to school, and that's one of the big questions. Who am I going to, I've heard my kids talk about all the different groups at school. There's the jocks, the athletic people. And over here is the brain trust, all the smart kids. And over here's well, there's 2 or 3 groups of weirdos. But who am I going to buddy up with? Who am I going to be friends with? Who will be my associates in life? In 1 Corinthians 15:33, there's the basic advice from the Bible. Don't fool yourselves. Bad friends will destroy you. That's pretty simple, isn't it? For goodness sakes, pick good people to be friends with. They may not be the most popular kids in school. They may not be real hip. They may not be wealthy. Sometimes they may not even be that smart. But bad friends will destroy you. You're going to go to work, and some of those people, you might be thrown in with some of the craziest folks in the world. But if you'll start paying attention to who you're working with, there's some good people there too. There's a bunch of bums who don't want to work, who are wild, who do ungodly things after work's over and maybe during work. You don't need to be too close to them. They can do their work down on that end, and you can do your work, and you'll be respectful, and that's it. But as you're looking for friends, There'll be some good people where you work. Be smart enough to begin to identify them. I've seen so many teenagers who've had the sadness in life. I had it. I think everybody has it. When you get up to that, your junior year, your senior year, you're out of school, and you sort of look at your friends, and a lot of them are not kids anymore. And they've changed, and they're headed down one road, and you're headed down another one. You stay on the good road. And you may have to lose those childhood friends. That's a sad thing. It's going to hurt you. But they're headed in a direction you just can't go. Don't fool yourself. Bad friends will destroy you. What am I going to do for a job? What am I going to do for a job? Most of us have that choice these days. It used to be in this country that you would be indentured out to somebody. In the early 1800s, you'd be indentured out to somebody in some profession. And what that meant, by the way, if you don't know what that meant you were some man's slave for a while you learned a trade. What am I going to do for my life's occupation? Mom, Dad, what am I going to do? In Proverbs 15 and verse 6, this is one thing you ought to remember as you look for a job. I've seen a lot of people, they want to start off as the CEO of some organization, which is okay if you can get there, but you're probably not going to start. You need to realize that better is little with the fear of the Lord than great treasure and trouble therewith. You sure you want to be a millionaire? You positive that's the goal you have in life for your job? With that money comes responsibility, comes beggars, comes investment choices. Better is a dinner of herbs where love is than a stalled ox and hatred therewith. Remember to keep things in perspective. It's not about the money. It's not about the car. It's not about the big house. It's not about being able to eat down at the fine restaurants. Better is a dinner of herbs where love is. That's important. That's the perspective. If you can't keep that firm in mind, you are headed for some misery for sure. Look in Proverbs 16 and verse 8. Here we read, better is a little with righteousness than great revenues without right. Now, that's not the popular thing. That's not what everybody in this country thinks. They think the goal of life is getting rich, living in a big house, driving a fancy car, and eating lots of big meals. But you'll discover toward the end that I'd have been better off, simple and happy, with a good woman and good kids, and I've been happy. Who in the world am I going to marry? Well, I've been trying to work that out for all of you. With varying degrees of success. Who am I going to marry? Well, first of all, you need to pay attention to the Lord's laws. God has some directions about that. First of all, he says, I say unto you that whosoever shall put away his wife, saving for the cause of fornication, causeth her to commit adultery. Now, that doesn't mean he makes her to, but he calls her, he puts her, presents her to the world as if she were an adulteress. And whosoever shall marry her that is divorced, committeth adultery. Whoops. There's one of God's laws. There's one of God's laws. As you're looking for a mate, a wife, a husband, don't marry somebody that's been divorced unscripturally. And we'll talk about that unscriptural part just a little bit more. But you might look for somebody that hadn't been married before. That would be kind of a starter. So you don't have all that baggage hanging on you that you have to work out. But as you think about this, look at Matthew 19:9, and we'll see a little bit more about this. I say unto you, whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be for fornication. Okay, you met some woman and she's divorced, or some man and he's divorced, and you just can't pass them up. Okay, I'm all right with that. The Lord's all right with that. But he says, listen, why was he or she divorced? Why? Now, I've seen people have been out dating some old dude for a year, and they haven't asked, why were you divorced? There it is. Simple sentence. Why were you divorced? I've talked to him and said, why was he divorced? Well, I don't know. Well, hello, what do you talk about? You go to all those meals at McDonald's and you're sitting there over the burger and fries. What in the world are you talking about? It can't all be about basketball and baseball, football. It's not all about work. Once in your life, you could ask the question, why were you divorced? And then pay attention. Well, I just didn't like her. She lost her figure. She was grumpy. Whatever. First of all, good advice here. You are not always going to be lovely to look at. And you might be a little grumpy occasionally. Just be warned, if he left that previous woman, he may leave you. But that's really not the problem. The problem is that it isn't the reason the Bible gives here. There's just one reason. Whosoever shall put away his wife except for fornication and shall marry another committeth adultery. If he doesn't tell you my mate was unfaithful to me, she ran off with the milkman. Are there still milkmen? With the guy down at the grocery store who puts the milk out in the case. She ran off with him. Okay, well, you at least have a scriptural right to marry. Still may not be smart, but you at least have a scriptural right. And whoso marrieth her, which has been put away for fornication, doth commit adultery. You don't have any business marrying that person. Just don't have any business doing it. You're going to make your life miserable. You're going to put your soul in jeopardy. Those are God's laws. Whom shall I marry? Well, notice some other of them. You need to realize that marriage is going to be for life. There's a lot of people think that it's just kind of a occasional thing. We'll just kind of get married, and then when we get tired of one another, we'll divorce. That's what it's become in our country. In Romans 7, verses 2 and 3, the woman which hath an husband is bound by the law to her husband so long as he liveth. You don't have a 5-year contract. All these baseball players, all these football players, they got a contract for so many years. And then it's up. They're going to get traded off to another team. That's not you. You don't get traded off. You don't have a 5-year contract. If the husband be dead, she's loosed from the law of her husband. There you go. So then, if while her husband liveth, she be married to another man, she shall be called an adulteress. And nobody seems to care about that much anymore. We watch folks on the TV. We admire stars all the time that are just adulterers and adulteresses. We have people that we elect to public office that are adulterers and adulteresses. If her husband be dead, she's free from that law, so that she is no adulteress, though she be married to another man. This is kind of simple. Who do I marry? Well, make sure you've got a right to marry. In 1 Corinthians 7, in verse 39, the wife is bound by the law as long as her husband liveth. But if her husband be dead, she's at liberty to be married to whom she will, only in the Lord. Well, what shall I do with my life in relation to God? There's a lot of young people I find that they finally get away from mom and dad and say, ooh, I'm tired of going to church, all that Bible class stuff, all that Jesus stuff. I'm going to cut loose. In Luke 9 and verse 26, whosoever shall be ashamed of me and of my words, of him shall the Son of Man be ashamed, when he shall come in his own glory and in his Father's and of the holy angels. You need to realize that this life is just here for a little time. Just a little time. Go around and ask one of these older people. And ask them, do you feel like you've lived a long time? And I'd almost bet you every one of them would say, I feel like it went by in a flash. I don't know what happened. I was born, and I feel like I grew up before I knew what was happening. I was married. My kids grew up. They're gone. And it just went by. So this life is just a short thing. It's just a little while. You need to realize that you're a part of something far bigger. You know, I saw some pictures that have been taken of the Hubble telescope. And they were looking about how big the universe is, and it's incredible. It's beyond imagination. But did you know the Lord that created it is larger than that? This life is more than just the little time we're here on this earth. So you need to think in those dimensions. In Matthew 10 and verse 22, ye shall be hated of all men for my name's sake. You're not going to be that popular. I wish we could go on YouTube with these sermons and with our Bible study program, and thousands and millions of people would listen and learn, but we struggle to reach people because the vast majority of the world is like that in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 7, the broad way. They just aren't interested. The narrow way is the way we have to tread. Ye shall be hated of all men for my name's sake. He that endureth to the end shall be saved. Are you willing to do that? Are you able to do that? Those are the questions every one of you young people, children, teenagers, young adults, that's what you're facing. In your life, your eternal life is going to be based on how you face those questions. Oh, it'd be wonderful. My goodness, I wish I could go back. I answered all those questions. I got them all. I don't think I got them all right. You need to be smarter about it. You need to be wiser. If you're here this morning and you're not a Christian, come while we stand and sing.
Oh, love that will not let me go, I rest my weary soul in thee. I give thee back the life I owe, that in thine ocean depths its